Hi, today we're going to be going over the basics of plot. So you're going to want to get your packet out and you're going to want to open it up to page 19, which you'll see is about plot. It's got the notes here and it's got a little image here. I recommend that you get a highlighter. You can get a pen if you'd like. Remember that your notes are for you. I'm never going to collect them. So whatever you want to do to help yourself out on this page is fine by me, but I'm going to be highlighting the most important parts as we go through. So go ahead and get that and I'll meet you on the other side. Here we go. Plot simply is the story. It revolves around a conflict, and it includes a chain of events that can be graphed out on a plot graph. And on the bottom of your sheet, you have the plot graph. I apologize for conflict getting a little messed up in the printing in your packet. Sorry about that, but you get the right idea here. Now, it's very important to know what conflict is. As we've talked about, it is the problem of the story. Now, there can be a lot of conflicts within a story, but when we're talking about plot, generally we're talking about the main conflict. And when we're doing a plot graph, we have to think about the main conflict. Now, I like to suggest that we think of conflict as a question, even though that's not 100% perfect and that's not how a lot of people do it, but that does help you find the climax eventually. So you could state the conflict is a beast is abducting and eating children from a village. That would be the conflict that's happening throughout the story. I like to tell you to think of it as a question. What will stop the beast from attacking the village? So here in our plot graph, you'll see that the messed up line here is representing the conflict. The conflict starts at the beginning and it goes all the way up here right before the climax. The conflict lasts this whole time on the graph. Exposition, we've talked about before. Exposition is the foundation of the story that gives essential information at the start, before the action. So in our plot graph down here, we have the exposition. Notice it's kind of like the foundation holding up the whole plot otherwise. And here is where we have the characters listed. That's main and ancillary. We will look at a more detailed version of a graph in the future, but this is the basic. It's also the situation, which is maybe a little bit about the beast or the village. And then we have the setting. Remember, time and place, not always perfectly told to the reader from the story. Character, situation, setting are all part of exposition. Next part is the rising action. These are the major events that lead to the story's climax. So rising action is this whole part here. The first major event is called the inciting incident. That's down here. This is the first thing that starts off the story. It could be a car chase, it could be a love letter passed, it could be some tragic thing, it could be some great thing. So the rising action starts with an inciting incident and it rises along with the conflict at the same time up to right before the climax, which is called the crisis point. Now, really, the crisis point is closer to the top right there, but that is the crisis point. The crisis point leads right up to the moment when the reader finds out how the conflict is solved. So here's an example. The hunter finds the beast at the top of the mountain. He hasn't solved the problem yet, but he's getting right up to it. As we talked about, climax is the point in the story where the reader finds out how the conflict is solved. A climax on a plot graph is only one sentence long, and that's right at the top here. So we've got inciting incident starting off the rising action, building up alongside the conflict. The crisis point leads right up before the climax at the very top, and it is only one sentence long. It's only one thing happening. The hunter stabs the beast in the heart. That solves the problem. After the climax is the falling action. These are the events that take place after the climax. Now, the climax is short. It shouldn't be paragraphs long or chapters long, but the stuff right before it and the stuff right after it might be long or short, depending on the story. It's the tying up. Falling action is the tying up of loose ends. The hunter journeys back to the village with the beast's head dangling from his saddle. That's the thing that happened. That was right after the climax, where the problem has been solved. All of the action has been resolved at the climax. And then the very end, it's a little bit confusing. However, the very end is called the resolution. This is the final part of the story. The townspeople lived happily ever after. Now, sometimes the falling action is really short, sometimes it's really long, but that leads you to the resolution at the end. All right, so that is the basics of plot. Now, there's a lot of deeper ways we can go into plot, and eventually we're going to be working on a fuller plot graph with more detail, but that's the overall basics. Your assignment now is to do the plot basics worksheet. I am not opposed to you working with a friend on that because some of it is hard to decipher if you haven't done this before. That being said, you should be doing your own work. Please make sure that you're working together and then putting your own answers in and not just copying off one or another. The idea is to get you to understand these plot basics, not just fill in a piece of paper. And that is a Google Slides. All right. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. Thanks a lot.